I fell in love with my neighbor. When I was 18, now I'm 30, and what we're living feels unbelievable. He was always just across the fence, always a few steps away, mowing his lawn shirtless, laughing too loudly at his own jokes, borrowing tools he didn't need just to talk to my dad. I was 18, quiet, invisible to most, but not to him. Never to him. Back then, I didn't know what I was feeling. I just knew my heart raced when he looked at me, that I couldn't stop thinking about the way he smiled, that being near him made the world go quiet. But I said nothing. I moved away. I grew up, and I tried to forget. Now I'm 30. I've come back to my hometown, and he's still there, still just across the fence. Only this time, something's different. This time, he's looking at me like he never wants to stop. And what's happening between us? I never imagined it could be this intense, this emotional, this real. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss a single moment of this story. What happens when the boy with the hidden crush becomes the man who finally says what he feels? Let's find out together. I was 18 when I first realized I was in love with the man next door. He wasn't much older than me, maybe 7, 8 years, but at that age it felt like a lifetime. I remember watching him through the window as he worked on his old Chevy, arms covered in grease, baseball cap turned backwards, the kind of easy confidence I never knew how to fake. His name was Logan. He had a crooked grin and this deep, steady laugh that echoed across the backyard like a song I couldn't forget. Everyone liked him. My parents called him the guy you can always count on. He helped with groceries, fixed fences, shoveled snow in the winter without being asked. And me? I just watched him, silently, hopelessly. Back then, I told myself it was just admiration, that I wanted to be like him, more confident, more grounded, more seen. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't just that I wanted to be him, I wanted him. The summer I graduated high school was the last time I saw him before everything changed. We had a barbecue in the backyard, and Logan came over with a six-pack and his dog. He sat beside me at the table. Our knees touched once, accidentally. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. He didn't pull away, but he didn't stay close either. He ruffled my hair before he left that night and said, "College is gonna make a man out of you, kid." And I wanted to ask, what if I already am one? Would you look at me differently? But I didn't say it. I went away for 12 years. College turned into work. Work turned into a life I didn't love in a city that never really felt like mine. Relationships came and went, none of them lasting. None of them reaching the place in me that Logan had occupied all this time. And then, a few months ago, my mom called. Dad had passed. Suddenly, quietly. I moved back home to take care of the house. It felt strange, walking back into my childhood room at 30. Like I was borrowing a version of myself that didn't quite fit anymore. Everything smelled like old wood and fading memories. I unpacked slowly, unsure if I was staying for weeks or forever. And then I saw him. Logan, still living next door, still working on cars, still that same half-smile under the same old baseball cap. Only now, I wasn't 18. And he wasn't just a fantasy anymore. He came over the day after I moved in. Knocked once, then let himself into the backyard like no time had passed. "I heard you were back," he said, setting down a bag of tools. "Figured the old porch light was probably busted again." It was. He fixed it in 10 minutes, then stayed for coffee. We sat at the same table where our knees had touched 12 years ago. Only now I was taller, my voice deeper, my gaze harder to break. He noticed. "You've changed," he said, leaning back in his chair. "So have you." His eyes stayed on me a second too long. Or maybe I imagined it. He looked away. "You staying long?" "I don't know," I said truthfully. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether anything here has changed." His brow lifted slightly. "Like what?" I opened my mouth to answer, but I didn't get the chance. His phone rang. He looked down, frowning, then stood up quickly. "I gotta take this. Sorry." He stepped away, answering with a soft voice I couldn't quite hear. I stayed seated, watching him from the kitchen window. He paced slowly, one hand in his pocket, nodding to whoever was on the line. When he came back inside, something was different. "I should get going," he said. "But it's good to see you again. Really good." He left without finishing his coffee. I sat there long after he'd gone, the room full of questions I didn't have the courage to ask yet. But one thing was clear. Logan wasn't just a memory anymore. He was here, and something about the way he looked at me felt like a door slowly creaking open. The days that followed passed slowly, like the town itself had slipped into a softer rhythm. I spent most mornings in the kitchen, sipping coffee by the window, pretending not to wait for him. But I was. Every movement in the backyard, every voice carried by the wind. I listened for his. It didn't take long. Logan showed up again 3 days later. No tools this time, no excuse. Just him, holding 2 iced lemonades like he'd never stopped walking into our yard unannounced. "You still like these?" he asked, holding one out. I nodded. "Haven't had one in years." He grinned. "Time to fix that." We sat on the back steps, knees bent, drinks in hand. The sun was high, and the air was thick with that slow summer heat I used to dread, but now it felt different, familiar, almost safe. "So," he said after a long sip, "what's it like being back?" I paused. "It's weird. Everything feels smaller, but the air feels easier to breathe." He laughed. "That's what happens when you leave the city. You remember how quiet the world used to be." We talked for hours, about the town, about his dog who'd passed last year, about work and people who'd come and gone. He told me he worked in construction now, had never married, never had kids. I wanted to ask why, but I didn't. Instead, I watched the way he looked at me. Not constantly, just enough. Long glances when he thought I wasn't paying attention. That slight shift in his voice when he said my name. There was something there. I could feel it, but I couldn't trust it. Not yet. That night, I opened my old yearbooks. There he was, in photos I'd memorized long ago, his arm slung around his friends, always smiling, always present. I, on the other hand, was barely noticeable, always standing at the edge, always wondering what it would feel like to be the one someone looked at and really saw. I wasn't that boy anymore. The next evening, I found myself outside again, just sitting, thinking. And then he appeared, like he always had, casually, like the distance between our houses had never mattered. He had a small radio with him. "Thought maybe you'd want to help me clean out the garage," he said. "It's full of junk, but you might find some old treasures in there." I followed him without thinking. His garage hadn't changed much. Tools lined the walls. A dusty canoe leaned in the corner. Boxes of photos and forgotten things were stacked up like a time capsule no one had touched. We worked in silence at first, organizing, sorting, occasionally laughing at something ridiculous he'd kept over the years. At one point, he pulled out a box of VHS tapes. "God," he muttered, "these are probably older than you." "I'm 30, I said, bumping his shoulder lightly. "Still feel like you're 18 to me," he said, before realizing what he'd said. He looked at me, then down. My breath caught. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I was scared of the answer. So I changed the subject. We ended up sitting on 2 overturned crates, drinking beer from the little fridge he kept in the corner. The sun was gone. Only a single bulb overhead kept the garage lit in a warm amber glow. Then, quietly, he asked, "Why did you really come back?" I looked at him. He was watching me now, not just looking, really watching. "I told you. My dad." He nodded slowly. "That's the official reason. But what's the other one?" I hesitated. Was it too soon? Was it foolish? Or was this the moment I'd waited 12 years for? But before I could say anything, he stood up. "I should get inside. Early start tomorrow." And just like that, the moment slipped away. I watched him walk back across the lawn, one hand tucked in his back pocket, his head tilted toward the sky. I sat in that garage alone for a while, listening to the last song on the radio. It was an old love song, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a boy chasing something impossible. I felt like a man standing at the edge of something real. The next few days were quiet. He didn't come by. No texts, no knocks on the door, and even though I told myself I was being dramatic, that maybe he was just busy with work, I felt the distance like a weight in my chest. It was ridiculous, really. I was 30. I'd been through real heartbreak before. But somehow, Logan's silence felt heavier than anything I'd experienced. Maybe because with him, silence had always been filled with something. Laughter, teasing, comfort. This one felt like avoidance. On the 5th night, I caved. I walked out onto the porch with a beer in hand, hoping to at least see the light in his garage on. But his house looked dark, quiet. Then I heard the screen door creak open behind me. "Didn't think you were home," Logan's voice said, softer than usual. I turned around. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking like he'd been wrestling with something all day. There were bags under his eyes, and his shirt was wrinkled like he hadn't changed since morning. "I've been here," I said. "Thought maybe you needed space." He let out a short breath. "Yeah, I guess I did." I stepped aside and motioned to the chair beside me. He sat without hesitation. We drank in silence for a few minutes, watching the stars try to break through the haze above us. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" he asked, eyes still fixed on the sky. I glanced at him. Every day I stayed in the city. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. "There's something I haven't told you." My stomach twisted. "Okay." He hesitated. "I've never been good at this, at saying things." "You don't have to." "I do," he interrupted gently, "because it's been eating at me since the day you got back." He turned to face me now, legs turned slightly toward mine, voice lower. "When you left for college, I missed you, more than I expected to. I didn't understand why at first. I thought I was just being nostalgic. But I'd see you in my head sometimes, like flashes, laughing, standing in the yard, looking at me like you were about to say something big and never did." I couldn't breathe. "And now you're here," he went on. "Older, different, but the way I feel..." He shook his head. "It's the same, maybe worse." I swallowed. "Worse?" "I mean, stronger." My heart slammed in my chest. I sat up straighter. "Logan, are you saying..." He looked at me, and for once his eyes didn't blink, didn't drift away. They held mine like he was anchoring himself to something real. "I don't know what I'm saying. I just know I don't want to pretend anymore." Then, before I could respond, he leaned forward and reached for my hand. It wasn't just a brush. It was intentional. His fingers wrapped around mine and held them like he was grounding himself through my skin. It was warm, safe, terrifying. I looked down at our hands, then up at him. Neither of us moved. "I used to dream about this," I said quietly. He gave a small smile. "Me too." Then his phone rang in his pocket. He flinched like he'd been slapped by reality. He let go of my hand, glanced at the screen. His jaw tightened. "I have to take this," he said. He walked a few feet away, answering with a sharp, "Yeah?" I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough. A woman's voice, loud, frustrated. He paced, listened, said, "I told you not to call this late," and finally, "I'll deal with it tomorrow." When he came back, he looked different, closed again. "Sorry," he said. "That was complicated." "Ex?" I asked carefully. He nodded once. "Something like that." The silence between us felt different now, heavy again, but not empty. He sat down, but the spark we had a few minutes ago had dimmed. Still, before he left that night, he touched my shoulder. Not a handshake, not a goodbye, just his hand on my shoulder for one long second, like a promise not to disappear again. He didn't say anything else, just looked at me, and left. And I was left wondering, was that touch a beginning, or the start of another silence? The next day I didn't see him. Not in the yard, not by his truck, not even through the curtains where his TV usually flickered late into the night. It was like he'd vanished again, like that moment we shared on the porch had cracked something open, and he was doing everything he could to seal it shut. I tried not to take it personally, I really did, but it hurt anyway. That night, I went to the grocery store just to get out of the house. I walked slowly through the aisles, grabbed things I didn't need, frozen meals, old magazines, a bag of grapes I knew I wouldn't finish. The clerk smiled politely, but I wasn't really there. My mind was still on Logan. When I pulled into the driveway, his truck wasn't in its usual spot, but there was a car I didn't recognize, parked crooked in front of his house, and then yelling. At first, I couldn't make out the words, just sharp voices, too loud for the neighborhood. I stepped out of my car and followed the sound around the hedge that separated our yards. That's when I saw her. A woman, maybe mid-30s, blonde, angry. She stood in the driveway with her arms crossed, eyes blazing. Logan stood opposite her, his face tense, hands clenched. "I told you I'd handle it," he snapped. "And I told you I'm done waiting." She fired back. "You don't get to play house with ghosts anymore, Logan. You either deal with it or I will." She noticed me then, froze. He turned around slowly, eyes locking with mine. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he walked over. "Hey," he said, voice tight. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, it's family stuff." The woman scoffed. "That's rich." He shot her a glare. "Go home, Miranda." "I want answers." "You'll get them, just not tonight." She stared at him another long second, then got in her car and peeled out, tires squealing on the pavement. Silence fell over the yard. I didn't know what to say, so I waited. Logan finally spoke. "That was my sister-in-law. My brother passed a few years back. I've been helping her with stuff here and there." That didn't sound like just family. He let out a bitter laugh. "No, it didn't." He looked exhausted. Older, somehow, like the weight he carried was finally showing. "Do you want to come inside?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. Inside my kitchen, he leaned against the counter, eyes unfocused. I handed him a glass of water, and for a moment, he just held it. Didn't drink. Didn't speak. "Why is this so hard?" he finally said. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Because you're scared. Because we both are. He looked up at me. But you're not running. Maybe I've already done enough of that. The room went quiet again. This time, it wasn't heavy. It was honest. I don't know how to be what you need, he said quietly. You don't have to be anything, I replied. You just have to stop pretending you don't feel this. His jaw tightened. What if I'm too late? What if I missed my chance? You didn't. I stepped closer, and he didn't move. I touched his arm, lightly, the same way he'd touched mine the night before. But this time I didn't let go. I've been in love with you since I was 18, I said. His breath caught. I didn't understand it then. I didn't even know how to name it, but it never went away, not once. And when I came back, I didn't expect anything, but I felt it again. Stronger. He looked at me. I feel it too. Those 4 words felt like lightning in my chest. But? I asked. He looked down. But I've built a life around silence, around not wanting, around staying safe. I nodded. Then maybe it's time you let someone tear a little of that down. We were inches apart now. His hand lifted, slowly, and touched the side of my face. You're dangerous, he said, almost smiling. No, I whispered. I'm just honest. Then we heard the front door creak, and a voice, familiar, high-pitched, called out. It was Miranda. Back. Again. This time, she wasn't alone. Miranda didn't come back alone. Standing beside her was a boy, maybe 10 years old, quiet, curious, with Logan's eyes. He deserves to know, she said firmly, looking straight at him, then at me. Logan went pale. Everything inside the room stilled. Then he knelt in front of the boy and said his name. The boy threw his arms around Logan's neck. I understood it all in that moment. Logan was a father, and he had never told me, not out of shame, but out of fear. Fear of ruining something before it even began. When they left, Logan turned to me, completely exposed. Now you know, he said. Do you still want me? I didn't answer with words. I just pulled him into my arms and held him like I should have 12 years ago. Because yes, I still wanted him, more than ever. He told me everything that night. The accident, the promise to his dying brother, the guilt, the years of living halfway. I listened, holding his hand, watching a man finally unburden himself after carrying silence like armor. We didn't talk about what we were now. We didn't need to. The next morning, he made breakfast. I brewed coffee. It felt ordinary, and that's what made it so powerful. As he walked me out, he stopped on the porch, kissed me softly, and said, "No more running. From you. From myself." I smiled. "Then let's start now." And we did. 2 houses, 1 story, and finally, after all this time, a beginning.